So my journey to teaching began when I was working as a substitute out in Moreno Valley. And I had gotten this job from my next door neighbor who was a principal for the school district. So he was like always encouraging me just to apply and then just to try a couple of the jobs out because during the time I was working as a server and then before that I was working as like a manager. So I decided to give it a try, and then I was out in Moreno Valley for a couple months. I'd have to say when I first started out substituting, it wasn't what I had expected. It was a little bit more challenging, especially because I thought I knew how to work with kids, but it was very different when you're like in a classroom type setting and there's like 30 of them opposed to just working with maybe like four or five of them. So it was definitely like a lot more challenging. But back to like the educational journey or journey to being a teacher, it started when I was at a particular elementary school and I was in the staff lounge. So when I was in the staff lounge, it was like a couple of teachers break just because I was a revolving sub, so I was just going in and out of classrooms, kind of letting teachers go out for their IEP meetings or other stuff like that. So then when I was in the lounge in between those, there was these two teachers who were on break. So they went into the lounge and then they were just discussing how the year was going. It was about April or May, so the year was like almost done. And then they had basically both said that they couldn't just wait for like the school year to be over. So I understood that just because it was challenging to work there, and I could only imagine what they had to deal with every day, like as far as the challenges of like just being a teacher, just always waking up early, creating like different lesson plans, like and just grading that. But it was just the way that they had said it, and the fact that one of the teachers had said like he said it in a way that he couldn't wait for it to be over because he had said only 30 more days and then we don't got to worry about this for another 3 more months. So then I was just sitting there and then I kind of took that the wrong way. Obviously, I didn't tell him anything, but I was a substitute there, like, day to day. And I thought it was my job just to try to reach these kids and change their lives. And then here was this teacher who had been there probably like, I think in the conversation, he had been there for maybe like 10 plus years. And then he had another like maybe 5 or 6 more years to go. And then here he was just saying only 30 more days and then we're off for like 3 months in such a derogatory sense that it made it seem like it was a chore. Like he just did not want to be there. So that kind of like, again, obviously to some people wouldn't have really rubbed them the wrong way. But to me, it kind of did just because he almost made it sound because he made it sound like he didn't want to be there anymore. So I'm a firm believer if you don't like your job, there's a bunch of jobs out there to get, even if they don't seem available. It's like you still have the privilege to go choose something else that you want to do. So um, after I heard that, I kind of wanted to become a teacher because I didn't want kids to have this kind of teacher. Like I know it sounds bad, but I didn't want kids to have this kind of teacher where they didn't want to be there. Like when I was as a substitute, like again, this was it was like one of two jobs that I was working. So I actually wanted to be there. Every day I was there, I was actually present for my kids. And here was another teacher where this is like his full-time job and he didn't want to be there at all. Like I can only imagine what that would translate into the students, especially if he's been doing this for like several years and he didn't want to be there. Like I just felt that the kids deserved a little bit more than that. So that was kind of like also my calling. It was literally that point when I decided, okay, I want to be a teacher because I want to be one of those teachers who actually comes to school prepared and wants to provide a positive impact for these students. Like I never want to be the kind of teacher who says only 3 more months, like only 30 more days. Like it shouldn't be like that. It should be like this is what your passion is to come into work every day. You shouldn't be waiting and counting down the days until you're off. So that's kind of like why I wanted to become a teacher because I wanted to impact these kids' lives. And then it was also like my calling that I knew that I was in that faculty lounge for a reason to hear that, to kind of change my like outlook on it. So then that being said, I definitely see how being a teacher in the community is such a big impact to these kids, because most teachers, they might not necessarily live in their community, and they almost take that approach where it's like a 9 to 5, where I come to work, I teach these kids, and then I leave. I don't necessarily think about what they're going home to. So as an educator, I want to be that kind of teacher who does think about what these kids are going home to, who brings that community context into like my teaching, to help them understand that I'm here for them and that I'm trying to help them or support them in whatever way I can, not just at school, but also in their community, and them just developing as a student. So again, there necessarily hasn't been any significant cultural beliefs or experiences that I've gone through that helped to shape this. It's more like a intrinsic good to do for these students. So, I mean, since I am like, Christian, I'm Catholic, I guess that might be one of my cultural beliefs, just the fact that you should try to help people out all the time. So, in a way, that is kind of one, but as far as like culturally, no, I don't really have those kind of experiences that have prompted me to become a teacher. But it was just always that inner sense that I should help other students do it. And then pretty much throughout like my whole life, it might sound kind of weird, but I always felt like school was a second home, just because I always felt like safe and secure at school. So becoming a teacher almost is like, again, me going back to that second home. Like, for some reason in my head, I've always had this idea that I just like school. I just like everything about it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of been like always in the back of my mind whenever I had other jobs. Like, man, I really wish I could go back to school. So yeah, so that's kind of also addressing to my journey to becoming a teacher. Um, as far as my teaching philosophies and looking at the various philosophers that we've written papers about, I'd say Horace Mann. I know he's pretty much the root of education, but he's been a philosopher I've aligned with the most, just because he does greatly promote the social elevation aspect of education, that any student, regardless of where they come from, like demographically, ethnically, socioeconomically, they can achieve better standing. And I'm pretty much a firm believer of that, especially looking at kids in Title I or Tier 1 school districts, where they might not necessarily have a lot of access to things. I definitely see how education helps the students um, achieve more than they're capable of given their environment. And then a lot of the times those students are very smart. So just bringing that whole philosophical idea that they could elevate themselves does kind of impact my teaching philosophy. And then that's something I would want to do eventually. I'd want to help those students, especially the students who might not have a lot of financial means, or they might think that they can never achieve anything good. I think it's up to teachers to instill like the better educational values in them, just understanding that if they do work hard, they can like achieve something they don't think they can. Um, so that's why I really like a lot of what Horace Mann thinks about how education is the bridge that will eventually like help repair society. And then basically, like when I use in instructional practices, I really think that students should be engaged with one another, because students, as well as like people like our age, we do learn best when we're working in groups, because we're able to bounce ideas off of each other and look at new perspectives that we might not otherwise have observed or otherwise have thought of. So when I do form different instructional practices, I like to incorporate some type of group work, even if it's just sharing with your elbow partner or your desk buddies, like the answer to a question, because that kind of helps you rehearse the answer before you say it. So no matter what, you're always going to have something to say, even if it's the wrong answer, or even if it's just an answer from like one of your friends. It's always something to talk about in class. So it sometimes prevents that awkward silence when a teacher asks, does anyone have an idea to share? So That's student engagement as far as like talking, collaborating with one another is something I really like to do. And then so far through this whole the various like terms and semesters, I feel like I definitely have a lot more knowledge as far as educational practices and the different methods that work best for me, as well as the different methods that I'm comfortable. Because I feel like as a teacher, you obviously get all these different pedagogies and all these different instructional models, but I think finding what works best for you will translate best to your classroom, because when you're familiar with it and when you're comfortable using it, you're able to focus also on the content, not necessarily just how you're going to get those points across. So I believe I've been progressing really well as like an educator at APU so far, and hopefully all this translates into me teaching my future classes. Um, Not only the content I'm trying to do, which is like social science or history, but also I just want them to be very well educated individuals in all subjects and translate that into, again, like how Horace Mann was saying, like bridging that gap in social inequality, just becoming changes in society that they want to see. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get through for my students. And yeah, hopefully this was kind of clear. It was a little bit back and forth, but that's basically my journey to becoming a teacher and the teaching philosophy I want to instill in my students.